another episode of Stoke Meter. And my goodness, we have two fabulous guests. Now, I know I say fabulous and all this good stuff over and over again, but man, I get giddy when we talk about the folks that have served our country. And in this case, we have Dr. Theresa Larson. And Dr. Theresa Larson is a former military, Marine. You were actually a commander too, right?
I was a platoon commander, yes.
Oh my goodness, that's so awesome. It's so awesome.
It is actually pretty fun as a platoon commander. I think as you get more in the ranks, well, there's more admin involved, but I enjoyed being a platoon commander, yes.
That is so awesome. And then we also have John Mccaskill. And if I said your name wrong, you can beat me.
No, you didn't. You did. You nailed it. You nailed it.
But John is a retired Navy SEAL commander. And both Theresa and John have been doing some amazing work in their different organizations. And I don't want to take the thunder on that one. And I'm just wondering if you folks can both tell us what you folks are doing right now before we actually delve into the conversation. So Theresa, I want to go to you first. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was having a conversation with Skelly back here earlier about this podcast and what we'd share. But he's my sidekick, cowboy, Wonder Woman cape on, getting ready for Halloween. Anyway, yeah, so I run a company called Movement RX, and I have two small children, and I run it with my husband, who really does a good majority of the work, to be honest. He makes things run. But we've been running our company for some time now, and just in the last few years, probably pre-pandemic to the pandemic, we've wanted to provide emotional and physical health programs. So we, not just the physical, because I'm a doctor of physical therapy, we wanted to make sure we involve the emotional side. And I just so happened to practice mindfulness and meditation myself, and it was really important to me. And I met John just through networking, and it was like, okay, we've got to work together and provide these physical and emotional healing programs to people. So that's what we do, is we have these experiences and in-person experiences that we provide organizations.
Oh, that's fantastic. And John, how about you?
Well, first off, Maurice, I love your energy.
Yeah.
I came into this call a little tired, and now I'm energized. So thank you for sharing your energy with me. And I'm honored to be here with you and Gary today. As far as what I do, a lot of the work that I do is with Theresa, as she mentioned. I have a consulting company, and it's not your consulting company in the typical sense of the word. I bring mindfulness and meditation to corporate teams and really anyone else who I believe needs it, which in all honesty is everyone. But mindfulness and meditation, that's what Theresa and I bring to the table as well. So, or rather, I bring to Theresa and our work that we bring that we do together. Wow, I'm stumbling over my words today. I'm so jazzed now. I'm giddy. So Theresa, we do movement and mindfulness. So the M2 experience, if you will. And I do that under her company, Movement RX, and we do that for first responders, corporate teams, veterans. Those are kind of our primary audiences. And it's been phenomenal, very rewarding. And in a weird way, self-indulgent. Like it's so rewarding. Theresa and I walk away from these things feeling very good about ourselves, but also completely exhausted. So it's kind of this fun kind of back and forth. So that's what I do. And then I run a podcast, Men Talking Mindfulness. I don't know if you can see that on my hat, MTM. And I do that with a good buddy of mine and Theresa's, Will Schneider. And we recently, all three of us just came together to do the Men Talking Mindfulness and Movement RX Mindfulness Adventure Retreat, our first one out in Durango where Theresa lives. And we're going to be doing those again in the future in Durango. And we look to have it in other places across the country as well. But those are basically, as Theresa likes to say, or Movement RX says, that we like to help people live a lifetime of physical and emotional freedom.
you know, when
So
yeah, go ahead, Gary, go ahead.
I have a quick question. So whenever something like this happens, people are seeing a need. And so if you could kind of guide us through, at what point, what was happening? How long ago did you guys look out and say, we need to step in and we need to do something?
Well, I mean, so personally, I think it's got to start from within. So I started Movement RX 9 years ago now, right after I got married. I said, peace out to the regular, PT world. It was like, I'm going rogue. But with that, starting a business, it's not like everything's all sunshine and rainbows, it's hard. And I dealt with depression and anxiety, and I lost my father, probably a few years into starting my business, and just needed some support in my life outside of just talk therapy. So a Marine friend of mine introduced me to a biofeedback mindfulness meditation coach who I started to work with years ago. And it was really powerful for me, because being a physical person, it like made me stop and ground myself and physically work on the single task of your breath, or one thing at a time, which was really hard. And believe me, it's hard for anyone, but it's very hard to this day. I would still consider myself a novice, but yeah, I think with that realization I needed in my own life, and then kind of still working on my business and it getting better, there still is this missing thing that I felt with what we were providing organizations. It was always like one-sided, just the physical. And I always knew the mind and body go together, but I didn't necessarily want to be teaching mindfulness and meditation myself, because that's for me, but I wanted someone else who was an expert in it to do it. And so it just so happened I started to post about, mindfulness and meditation and my experience with it. And that's how John and I connected. But it wasn't until really the pandemic when organizations were like, oh, shoot, we need an emotional piece to this. Yeah. And that's really when it started to open up for both of our work, really.
Yeah. I've got to ask though, too, when you think of mindfulness, and just from the construct of where you folks were, let's face it, you were in some pretty diehard circumstances. and when you think of mindfulness and meditation, it's almost an oxymoron with the world that you folks came in from. And how did you make that transition? Because here you have to have this tough persona, and rightly so. But the fact of the matter is, when you are meditative, when you are mindful, it's amazing the peace that really transcends where you're going through. I just watched a show where it was a National Geographic show where they saved the 13 kids in
13 lives.
Yes, 13 lives.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I'm blown away. And when the divers got out there, one of the first things they said is, our coach had us meditate.
Right.
I mean, what was that? Was that already almost 2 weeks that they found him later?
I don't know how long it was, but I know that coach, he was beating himself up for having the kids down there, and basically he ended up saving their lives through, or at least one of the aspects of saving their lives. And that was through meditation and controlling their breathing and controlling their minds. It was absolutely incredible story. But yeah, it was a while. It was a while.
It was a good long time. I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't have lasted 3 days in that dark.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. But so how do you overcome a person's defenses when you're saying, you know what, have you ever given this a consideration? And this is how it worked for me. But explain how that happens. There has to be some kind of great connection there. It's obvious that you folks have that.
Yeah, well, I don't want to give away our secret sauce, but
super secret.
That's right. It's just a little paprika. That's all it is. The funny thing is, I was that way. when I similar to Theresa, I struggle with my own battles of anxiety and stress. And when I had a counselor recommend mindfulness and meditation to me, I essentially laughed in his face. And then he was very patient with me, first of all, and then he tried to show me that I could use it as a performance enhancement. And that was almost the selling point to me initially. And in using it, I noticed that my performance improved mentally and physically, personally and professionally. And the side effects, quote unquote, were that I was able to deal with stress differently. I was able to process stress differently and anxiety differently and depression differently, and look at myself as a human being and not define myself by those traits, not say I am a stressed person, I am an anxious person, I am a depressed person. I noticed that those were things that came into my life. I processed them and got onto the other side of them. And now what I do, or what we do, is quite often, yes, you mentioned the fact that we come from a different background than most people who teach these things. I think that opens the doors that normally wouldn't open to what it is we're teaching, but then it's on us to open the minds, right? So we get into the corporate teams, but when we start with the corporate teams, there's a lot of people that sit there like this with their arms crossed, and they stare at us like, oh great, what is this all about? We have to be here. I'm only here because I have to be here. But then by the end, the shoulders drop and the facial expressions light up and they start smiling. And I think that has to do with the opening the minds piece. And we do that through, much like that counselor did, is we introduce the science behind it. It's not this woo-woo weirdo stuff that many of us, including myself, how I used to look at it. It's not that woo-woo weirdo stuff that everyone thinks it is. When we show the science as to why it works physiologically in your brain, when Theresa talks about down-regulating the nervous system through what she teaches, the movement side, and then people can see, oh, now I see why these two are working together to teach the mindfulness and the movement. Oh, the body and the mind heal one another. Oh, they work together. Oh, and then there's like this kind of they let the guard down, and it normally really opens up their minds, but also up and this is going to sound woo-woo, but it opens up their hearts to take in the healing effects of what it is we're teaching.
Oh, that hits me right here, because I was in my regular life, before I went off on my own, I was a leadership development consultant and learning development. So I know that feeling very well. The only difference is you could have kicked their butts, but both of you could have just went physically dominated. But that you put that aside, and it's amazing to see the transition that you yourself made. It's been really neat to learn about you too, because there's so many things that you've overcome. And Theresa, you mentioned, actually it's just flat big on your website. It says new normal in your life.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah,
that is such a huge, that's a huge realization. Do either of you know Pam Zembic by chance? So
no.
Pam Zembic, her husband Doug Zembic, they call him the Lion of Fallujah. He was killed in that. And what she said was, when she was going through processing, and Gary, interject anytime I'm missing the point here, but she said that when I lost my husband, I just went into this thing. I worked harder. I became the best salesman. I ran a marathon. I didn't eat, and just bam, 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 bam. And until she had a complete breakdown. And it was this process of what she then learned was an identity reconstruction. She took away everything. It took away everything that she knew and identified with, and it was this identity reconstruction. And so when you look at Theresa, when I read that new normal in your life, it was so impactful, just because in many of our guests we've seen, there is a new normal. They didn't realize that there was a normal beyond that other normal. And how do you help people realize that and get to that? So you have the mindfulness and meditation, but how do you get there, man? Just that's a tough procedure to get to. I don't know if you even call it a procedure.
Well,
It sounds like it's a surgical procedure.
process.
A process. There you go.
I think that's so you kind of, if you can, relate it to the sales process, if you will. There, there's 100 steps that takes, right, to help someone understand what they need or whatever. I don't even, sales process probably isn't the best way, just spectrum, right? Like everyone's at a different phase of their life. And so, for me, I knew it was almost like I hit, my back was against the wall when I realized I really need something to help me find calm in the midst of these storms I feel like are happening so often. And so I sought out help and asked my friends, like, what do you think? And what would you do? And people who were involved in their own self-care, because you have to consider the source of feedback you get, right? Who are you asking for help? If you're asking someone who doesn't necessarily respect the relationships they're in or abuses relationships, like that's maybe not the person to ask, versus someone who's like actively seeking help and working on themselves. So, I knew that when I was open to try. And I think that's really important for people. John talks about this a lot in his talks, like fixed versus growth mindset. You have to have a growth mindset. If you're fixed and you think you got it all and you've tried everything, well, okay, then there's not much we can do for you until you have a growth mindset and say, you know what, I'm willing to get better. And you got to get beyond like surface level with people when you're talking about this stuff, because me just saying you need to be more physically fit, or I'd love to improve your range of motion, that could be great for someone who's trying to improve their performance in the gym or in a sport. But when you're trying to get to a healing level, it's like, why is this actually so important for you to get better? Like, is it because you want to have a better relationship with your kids and your wife? Is it because you just want to live a longer life and you want to have happier days? Like, you got to dig in to the gut reason of why people want or need to get better. And they've got to tell you that, right? Like we all have to express that. And maybe, John and I are kind of the facilitators of those questions of look at your life. Like, what do you want? What do you need? And here are some tools. But it could go one ear out the other if you're not open-minded or have a growth mindset. And so, very often we always get really great feedback, right? But there's always a few that are like, yeah, whatever. But for the most part, people are like, you opened my eyes to this new way of thinking or being. And it always helps, when it comes to providing the science, like the facts, right? What are the facts behind this work too? It's like, look, we know that happiness comes from being present in your life. And we know that it comes from having good support system and being able to be present with those you love and yourself. So do you want that? Yes or no? It's like, and go from there.
Man, you just hit it right on the head. I just got in Hawaii we call it chicken skin.
Well,
because
Skelly has goosebumps too. Even talking about it.
Because when you just simplified it so well. Be present. To be happy, you have to be present. And it's amazing. I look at everything that I've ever gone through when I was unhappy. I was trying to change things that I couldn't, whether in the past or maybe worrying too much about the future. Be present. That was deep.
It's there's like so many wonderful things about that, that you can dig in, like, and John and I have spoken about this as friends and with our people we work with. It's like the past is in the past and it can get you down, but it doesn't have to. Right. It can be, you can change the story you tell yourself about your past, but it doesn't have to dictate the now or the future. And I consistently have to remind myself of that. So that's just like one principle
Yeah.
that practicing being in the present can do. But then also just the fact that when we are in the present, like just talking to you here and now versus thinking of my grocery list or what I'm going to do with my kids later, right? I feel better. I feel more physiologically calm.
Yeah.
So, and I'm enjoying this conversation versus being like, okay, when's this going to end?
Well,
I'm not thinking that. I'm actually really enjoying this.
John, you said something a little earlier, kind of where you started with your clientele, so to speak. And this hits really, really close to home with me with the pandemic. You were talking about first responders, you were talking about EMS, you were talking about military, that type of thing. I was a manager of an emergency department during the pandemic. The thing that I saw on the backside was this was one of the first events that on a big scale affected everyone and knocked everybody down. People that typically pride themselves on being able to handle everything or be strong or, buck up, you can get through this.
Right.
We're just falling left and right. And we're still seeing that. And I'm just wondering from your guys' perspective, how you've seen that kind of unfold and where are we at in trying to help these people?
As far as
Good
answering
question.
that
was a great question.
The latter question, where are we with helping these folks? There's definitely progress being made. What I like to see is that a lot of leaders are stepping up to the plate and saying, you know what, I need help helping my people, right?
Yeah.
There's that buck up and get through this mentality that's been something in the past where leaders are like, hey, suck it up, buttercup, you can get through this, and we have to get through this, you have to get through this or else. Now there's the mentality, oh, you know what, I as a leader am struggling, and I know that my people are struggling, and I need to bring in professional help. Whether that is, myself and Theresa and what it is we teach, whether it's psychologist, whether it's, taking a retreat or time off, there's a realization amongst leaders that their people need the time, the tools, and the help, which is great. As far as the metrics, I wouldn't be able to tell you the exact metrics on where we are with that, but it's definitely, there is a society-wide, maybe even global-wide realization that we can't do this on our own, right? And whether that's as a leader or whether it's as a member of an organization, we are all in this together, and we need to lean on one another at different times, and that's huge. So there's definitely a change in mentality there. As far as what it is that we do with that, it comes again full circle to the science behind it, and explaining that science and having people understand that this is not just woo-woo. It is in fact based in and supported by science, and we can show the metrics just in the classes that we've done. Right. Theresa does an assessment at the front and the back, and she shows, okay, well, you feel your energy has changed because you've been practicing mindfulness. You feel your mobility has changed because you've been practicing what I teach with the lacrosse balls and the stretches and the movements that I show you. So we've seen that there is in fact changes, and we can show that to the corporate teams. Hey, if we do a 3-hour workshop with your team and they actually do what we teach now, there's a lot that's on them still, right?
Yeah.
It's still on them. We're not coming in there and doing it all for them. They have to actually do the work, whether that's the meditation or the movement. But once they do, they see a dramatic increase in their energy. They see an increase in their mobility, a decrease in their pain. And that's where that's great. And now there's corporate leaders that are concerned about the bottom line, and we were like, okay, well, if you are able to do this, then your bottom line can increase. But that's not what we're here about. We're here about changing people's lives for the better, whether that's whether that affects the bottom line or not. Most of the time it does in a positive way, but That's not why we're there. We're there to help their people live happier, healthier lives, that lifetime of physical and emotional freedom.
Well, I absolutely have 100% respect when I popped open your website. And one of the first things that it said was take care of self, especially as a leader. What it reminds me of is, when you're flying somewhere and they talk about the oxygen.
Right. Yeah. And
But
Theresa can tell you.
Yeah,
that,
take care of yours first.
Right. When I talk about that, that's the very picture that I have up is the flight attendant with the oxygen mask. I mean, because, and Theresa can talk about this too, in the core, they pride themselves in taking care of their people, which is very important. As a leader, you absolutely need to take care of your people. But if you're not taking care of yourself, then you can't take care of your people, right? And Theresa and I are both parents of young children, and there's times when, as an entrepreneur, there's a desire to get up and grind and just grind yourself into the ground. And Theresa and I we're battle buddies. We check in on one another. We're like, hey, and she's great about keeping tabs and making sure I'm taking care of myself. And hopefully I'm great about doing the reverse. But if you take care of yourself, then you're going to be better. You're going to be better mentally, physically, and emotionally. And if you're better in those realms and others, you're going to be able to take care of your people in a better way. If you don't take care of yourself, then you're going to fall apart. The wheels are going to come off, and then you're not going to be the leader that they want you to be, that they need you to be. So
this is geeking me out even more. Well, Gary, this reminds me of our conversation. We just, John, I think it was before you got on, Theresa. We interviewed a New York Times best-selling author named Liz Wiseman, and she wrote a very pivotal book. Matter of fact, she meets with Carol Dweck a lot on the mindset stuff too. But it's amazing because she wrote a book called Multipliers, and you folks are multipliers.
I've heard her speak.
Yes, she's fantastic. And just hearing what you folks do, you folks are creating other multipliers, how to think like a multiplier, basically meaning you take care of yourself, you help people, you challenge people to do their best, you don't micromanage and everything like that. They call those diminishers. You're taking those diminisher tendencies and chuck them out the window, making sure that as they focus on themselves, they really go. And that's another segue into an acronym that you have, Theresa, that I was just, why haven't I heard of these folks before? And that was your acronym of love, right?
Self-love. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's well, so the acronym of self-love this is when I did my first, and not my last, TEDx talk. It was like 6 weeks after I gave birth to my first kid. And I mean, I was in like the fog of baby, not the fog of war, but like the fog of baby, where I was like, where am I? What day is it? Who am I? And it was just so overwhelming. But I had committed to doing this TED talk, and you have to memorize your talks. And so I came up with an acronym to help me remember the talk. And that's where, and so that's the love principles is what I came up with, which is, I still talk about it to this day. Yeah. And it's still the some of the letters in terms of what they mean are different. Like lead you, the L's is lead you first, right? Like we just spoke about, you have to learn to lead yourself before you can lead others. And I learned that the hard way. I was very, very good at helping other people, and I still am very good at helping other people, but can keep myself in check more, right? I know when I'm starting to like feel really exhausted or more overwhelmed, that's when I need to check in. And as long as I keep up with these practices that we teach, right? Practice what you preach. Like that's important to me. I'm okay. But lead you first is a big one. The O stands for oxygen. Like literally, thankfully we do all breathe, right? That's great. It's all involuntary, but to be able to breathe more efficiently, and to think about the nutrients oxygen gives you, like literally your red blood cells, like your cells, your brain, like is very effective. It can pull out emotions, like we just experienced on our retreat, like different ways of breathing. And so not undermining the gift of breath and like the fact that we do breathe involuntarily and we can make our breath better. And then the V is vulnerability and how powerful that is. If you just like look at anything that Brene Brown talks about, you know, it's there's no shame in vulnerability. It's like being able to share with your loved ones how you feel and what's coming up for you and your journey, and be able to ask for help and work with a therapist who you know could help you, or knowing that you need help is just an act of vulnerability in of itself, and like actually reaching out about it. And then the E is, it used to be endurance mindset. That's what I did in my TED talk, and I gave an example actually of a Marine sister of mine who had stage 4, like a very rare, like adrenal gland cancer. And she had 2 sons, and she just like till the day she died, she just got up and went after it every day and would show up. And I mean, she would struggle through trainings with me, but she would show up. And I was like, and she was just like, I'm here to show my kids what's possible, and I'm not giving up. And that, you know, I still get goosebumps thinking about her. And but the E was at that time was enduring mindset, which she had, but it's, you know, with my education around the sciences turned into elasticity, just like the fact that neuroplasticity, right, can occur in the brain. And John teaches about that, but like your brain can change. This way of thinking that you don't like or that doesn't serve you can change. And then elasticity, like literally your tissues, if you have chronic pain and you're having trouble with achiness or hot spots or extensibility in tissue, like it can change if you work on it. So that's the love principles.
It's so cool because, all right, this is going to be a constant geek out talking with you folks. I'm just going to let you know that, because John, I know that you grew up in South Africa, which actually blows my mind. And I'm a rugby coach. Right now we're coaching the girls. There's the head coach, and then I'm one of the coaches there for conditioning. And it's amazing because everything that you just explained there, when I see when they become effective, they apply every one of those principles. And every time that there's a struggle, there's something that is related to what you folks are talking about that is not being mindful. It's really something that we're not doing. I've learned so much from watching that team and then tying this together with what you folks are talking about. It's just it's just reinforcement, man. And watching Gary up here, I look at the Gary meter because he always has this little smile going on over there. But I don't.
Well, the cool thing about what you're talking about, and I think this is something where Western philosophy or Western medicine, I think that's where we've historically just failed, is being able to actually not silo us into systems or whatever it might be. You guys are the prime example for me of when you say mindful and movement, bringing those two together. In a lot of ways, that's kind of an Eastern philosophy, is what I think of. But when you can take both of those and meld them together, great things can happen. And I'm a huge believer that, you know, the mind follows the body and the body follows the mind.
Right.
And if you ignore either side of that equation, you're destined to be ill. You're destined to be sick. So it's exciting to see how you guys have come together and what you've been able to accomplish by bringing kind of those two sides together.
It is.
Yeah, well, it's definitely Theresa's brainchild. That, you know, she reached out I guess about 2 years ago now, and was like, hey, I think we could do something together. And for me, it was a leap. I was like, what are we going to do? But now that we've been doing it for so long, I was like, of course, this makes sense. So I'm very thankful for Theresa and her forward thinking. But you know, I do have to give credit to Western medicine in emergencies, right? A lot of things that if there's a critical need, Western medicine is pretty amazing. Like Western medicine has saved my child's life. Western medicine has saved my brother-in-law's life. Western medicine has saved many lives. But I will also say that Western medicine, I don't believe, is best in long-term care most of the time. And that's where what we are teaching, and yes, it's typically looked at as some type of Eastern healing, Eastern medicine, if you will. I believe what we are teaching is better for the long term, better for the brain, better for the body, better for the heart. You know, getting out and walking, like Theresa talks about, getting motion is lotion.
Motion.
And sorry, I totally stole your thunder there, T. But yeah, I mean, getting out and walking is great for the body, right? Obviously, we know that, but it's also great for the mind. Getting out and looking at the trees, listening to the leaves blowing, looking at the sun, taking in that vitamin D. You know, there's so much goodness that is out there that we're not using in Western medicine.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you say that's one thing I noticed. Me and my wife did a tour of China probably about 10 years ago, and just walking through the parks and seeing everyone doing their Tai Chi and exercises and everything else I think you actually just kind of clarified something that I've never been able to really put my thumb on. And in a sense, what we do a really good job of fixing broken people. I'm going to rephrase what you said. But we tend to fail on preventative and just living a good life, like giving people the tools to feel good and be happy.
Right.
You know, we do, like I said, we do a great job. You come in and you're broken, we'll patch you up and send you back out.
Right.
But at the same time, let's fix people before they get to that point.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of these broken people, it is mental issues, and you know.
Right. And you know, focusing on what makes you happy too, right? So in the West, typically, what people use as a metric for their happiness is their level of success.
Yes.
And what is success? You know, money, cars, a nice house. That's a lot of, and hey, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against money and a nice car and a nice house. I love all that, but that's not how I define success. I define success as a father, as a husband, you know, and what level of fulfillment I get out of that. I mean, I don't know who said it, but I've heard it said that, you know, no level of success is going to outweigh the failures in your home.
Yep.
And that's typically where, hey, we're going to find the next promotion. We're going to get that new car. We're going to get that new, new raise. Maybe we're going to win the lottery, and we're going to think, oh man, now I'm going to be happy. No, you're not. No, you're not. You got to find something else to find your happiness, something else to base your happiness off of and to continue to work on. And typically that's not the stuff outside of our homes. Typically it's something inside your homes, or even further inside your heart. And that's what people need to really start focusing on. And that's another confusion that the West has, is it's not the outside things, it's the inside, whether that's inside your home or inside your heart.
Well said.
Deal. That is such a big deal. We were speaking with Sean Covey.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and he was talking about, we got into this conversation about a foundation that he did. I was driving past near where he lived in Utah, and I saw this horse center, and it went from 7 habits for highly effective kids, 7 habits for highly effective people, to what his real passion is. And what it is a place where they bring all these young women in to deal with mental health by helping horses.
Nice. And
what he then went on to say absolutely floored me, because I have 2 daughters myself, and that is 1 in 3 girls has some type of mental health or mental or emotional health thing that they're dealing with. And I thought, no way, no way. And then subsequently, almost, Gary, what would you say, about 90% of our subsequent guests brought up mental health in some form or another. And when it goes right down to it, you're right. There was so much of this stuff that you folks already talked about, that there's things outside of themselves that they're trying to overcome. They're defining themselves by external success.
Right.
And so,
and social media has just compounded that effect.
My goodness.
It used to be where we would compare ourselves to the Joneses next door, and now we're comparing ourselves to the entire globe at the same time. And there's no way you can get around that. Hey, you post something and one day you get 100 likes or whatever, and you're like, oh man, I am 100% relevant, I am successful. And then the next day you post something and you get nothing, and then you feel irrelevant. And I think that's where a big piece of our mental health challenges come from, is from social media and the fact of feeling relevant one day and feeling completely irrelevant the very next.
Oh, that sums it up so well, man.
Well, and it's also isolating us. We're doing this all virtually. We're doing it, which is we're a communal species. We need people. We need each other. I mean, there's so many good things that have happened, with social media and with the internet, but that is definitely one of the fails. Is I literally tell my kids sometimes, I have a teenage son, I'm like, just go out and get in trouble. I don't care. Just get out of here. Go do something, So I got your back. I'll pay the bond, whatever.
Yeah. That's so good.
Cole, I hope you're not listening to this, man.
That's funny.
Well, if I may, and you tell me if this is off limits, because it's just a question, because again, reading your stories, there were bouts with the PTSD, with this, and John, especially on the survivor's guilt. I had no operation. There was no idea that there was an attachment to Operation Red Wings there, and then depression. Though the level of intensity that you folks saw things, I can only imagine. I can't. I mean, the movies don't do it justice. The closest I've ever come, I'm a 9/11 survivor, so that's about as close as I have ever seen it. But you saw that on a day-to-day basis, both of you, in some form or another. How was it that you folks started to see what it would take to, I want to go back to what Pam said, to that identity reconstruction that put you in that place where now it's obvious that you've overcome it, but I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that so that we could see it's if you folks could do it, like anyone could potentially pull that off, right? Anyway, that's where I'm coming from. And if that's off limits, I completely understand. I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, John, you want to start?
Oh, I was going to let you.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Okay. Taking the coat off for this one. Okay. Well, yeah, the term, so this is something that the term identity reconstruction in a way is, I think coming from the work we do, it's a way, and I've had to rephrase this in my own mind, is that actually I've been there all along. I've shifted my behaviors. I've chosen to change, but I think Gretchen Evans, right, shared this in a presentation she gave. She's like, what lies within us is much greater and stronger than what lies ahead of us or what we're up against. And I think if you think of us as this little being, our heart is our center, and we go through life and we've been impacted by loss, or like for me, I lost a parent my mother at a young age. I literally, saw her pass away in front of me over the course of 4 years, right? Was there with her every day. Don't even remember if I went to school or not, or I know my grades weren't great. And I don't even remember what my brothers did during that time, but I grew up in this like chronic stress state, which I think, depending on where you grew up, maybe that's other kids or other people can relate to that, but it was just chronic stress of loss. And then also performance. There was this other aspect of my life, not only dealing with loss, but just performance, as I got attention from being a really good athlete. And that fed my self-esteem. And if I didn't, and I even like read a quote by Michael Jordan about society only notices winners. I mean, he was, saying that in terms of he said that in a supplement magazine. Like, what is a 10-year-old doing reading a supplement magazine? But I was. So it will shed light on the household I grew up in, which was very loving, but also there's a lot of tough love. And so, but yeah, like I took that on and was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be good enough and loved, I better do well in school and in sports. And so that's the trajectory I put myself on. And that was, as you can imagine, like a roller coaster. Every time I won or lost, it was like this roller coaster of emotions. And but who I was still in there. It was just every won and loss like took me further away from knowing who I was. And so, that took me into, my late teens and 20s, and I ended up developing a mental health condition, an eating disorder, but could have been anything else. Just addiction is addiction. It's just, that's how I coped with some of the stressors I was up against. And it again, I chose to cope in those ways because I lost sight of who I was. And everything was reliant on what my commander would tell me who I was on a fit rep, or what my Marines thought of me, or how I did in this game or that game, or my boyfriend at the time, whatever. And versus like really diving deep first in getting to know who I was and leading from that place. I led from a place of what other people thought of me, which didn't necessarily, I still treated people on the outside would say, you're a great leader, you did a good job. Like, right. But I was all over the place emotionally. It was like fighting a battle that was unseen, which to be honest, most of us are, right? John actually shares this in his talks. Like either you're about to take a hard hit in life, you're either going through one, or you just went through one. And so when I started to, I was able to recover from the eating disorder, right? But I'm always kind of in remission there. And then started a business, like all of this same stuff actually came up again for me, of like depression, anxiety, not being able to cope with the wins and losses and rejections and successes. And that's when I started to like learn to ground myself with this mindfulness and meditation. And that, like literally the human being that taught it to me was like, you're getting to know yourself at the deepest level of who you are. Like you're spending time with who you are. And the meditation is getting you there. It's allowing you to be with yourself, minus all of the thinking mind, which is basically this just DJ that won't shut up. Right. And so to teach him how to shut up is to shut up is actually a good thing. But like learning skills, like I am not who I say, I am not what I think, right? Knowing that the majority of my thoughts are negative or biased is actually really helpful to know, because then when I tell myself I'm an idiot, I know I'm not, right? I know that's not true. Or if someone says something about me based on what I wrote on social media, right? Or whatever, okay, that's their stuff, like I don't need to take that on. So this skill has brought me closer to who I am. And I lead from a place of my heart and mind versus like what everyone else thinks of me. And I think the world needs to hear that. Young women need to hear that. I want to teach my kids this because the world is a tough place. It's amazing, but it's a tough place. So that's my spiel.
That's freaking awesome. I love it.
Well, I think it's really cool that you say identity reconstruction, but yet you have to balance that between the constant of who you are. And I really appreciate that.
You're in there all along. It's just are you able to spend time with yourself and to get to know you and to bring out who you are versus what you think everyone else thinks you need to be. I think John and I just read a book called Think Like a Monk.
Yes.
And
Yes.
anyway, there's this quote in there. I don't know if I'm going to say it right, but like, we are who we think others think we are.
Yeah. So it's
interesting.
I am not what I think I am, and I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am.
That's awesome. That's so true.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you really think about that, you're like, wow, yes. And the more you can, just knowing that is helpful because, okay, regardless of what you guys think of me or anyone else, like, I know who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, it would still hurt if you're like, yeah, you're a big D-bag, or, you know, or like, I still know I'm okay who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your candor. I do. I just love your candor. Oh man. Well, John, how about yourself?
Yeah. Well, man, I got so enthralled in listening to Theresa, I kind of forgot where I was going to go. So let me just okay. So for me, getting to where I can live with who I am and live with what I've seen and done or haven't done. Sometimes there's guilt in not having done something, not having done enough. And I know that's the flip side of a coin for post-traumatic stress is there are soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardsmen that feel as though their friends did more than they did and they didn't do enough. So there is that side of that. So anyway, I think what has helped me to get through that, and it sounds kind of trite, but is on the end of Saving Private Ryan. And you know, they're on the bridge and Tom Hanks grabs Private Ryan and he says, "Earn this." And I feel that identity reconstruction, if you will, is me changing the perspective of why am I alive when my buddies died in Operation Red Wings, to I am alive because of what they did. Right now, and that may be a stretch. I mean, in that particular operation, but they have helped to serve and protect and defend our way of freedom. And I have the life that I have because of them and people like them that have given and paid the ultimate sacrifice. And so now, rather than feeling this guilt, I feel I have to earn this. And now I'm doing that through the work that Theresa and I do in paying it forward. And again, that may sound trite, but for me, it's a way of coping, and I think a way of continuing to serve and give back. So that's what helps me.
Man, I will say this. I'm going to add something onto this too. Is what it's constantly earned. You folks, I'm thanking you two, and everyone that's alive every day for the freedoms that you've offered us. Yes, there are sacrifices made from the lives given, and that's again an ultimate sacrifice. But I look at what everyone that came back and the things that they have taught me and the things I know that they've given. I look at my dad too. He was all the way till he wouldn't talk about his war wounds and such. He told his friends everything. That's how I found out about the Battle of the Bulge. I had no idea he was there.
We needed a podcast back then. That's the joke. Is how do you get a man to talk about himself? Get him on a podcast.
But that's it. I just thank you for everything that you've done. I wanted to definitely say that because it definitely doesn't negate anything that you did or didn't do, either of you, because I'm enjoying where I'm living right now because of everything that you folks have put on the line. So can't.
Well, and that falls on us is now what can we do to earn that?
Yes. You know? Yes. I would 100% agree. Yep.
Just as much as that's relevant to you, that's relevant to us as well. So thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I apprate that.
This is
I know
And that's
TLC.
not trite. That is not trite
no,
at all.
not tried at all. No, I don't even know what to say because it's just an honor to. I know I've repeated myself over and over in that, but it truly is. And I was tickled, for lack of a better word, when you folks said yes. I go, because you're doing so much, and I want to thank you once again for making the time today.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having us.
Thank you.
You
Thanks for
got
your
it.
energy.
Yes,
that's
indeed.
A big part of it
Indeed.
too is you're also giving back by doing this work and sharing messages and living your life and helping other people. Like that's how you're giving back too, which I appreciate.
We will definitely take that validation.
Take it.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Love
Well,
it.
stay on for a second right afterward.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there. But thank you.
You're
Big time.
welcome.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
guys.